why did you do this? Why start HPAC? Why, you know, why?
So I was a community organizer when I started out. Well, actually, okay, here's the truth. I started out, I got my master's degree in counseling, and I was a horrible counselor. I was just terrible. I wanted to take people home and kiss them on the head. I was just the worst counselor you ever met. So I tried to find another profession, and my husband was doing his residency. We were in Minnesota, and I started working with kids in Minnesota. I got a job as a community organizer. I had no idea what a community organizer was. I said, oh, I can do this. Sure, no problem. I can write grants. I'd never written a grant other than like one little one. And so I got this job, and it was in Minnesota, and I started working. They said, you're going to start a teen council, youth council. I said, okay. And I started just going around the neighborhood. Minnesota is very white, and there are pockets of diversity. In St. Paul, Minnesota, where I worked, it was a relatively diverse community. There was a lot of Hmong, there was a lot of Latino and African American students, and that was where I was charged to do this work. And so I started going around just chatting with kids. I'm like, hey, we're gonna have this youth council. I need you to come to a meeting. And they said, okay, okay. So like, of course they weren't gonna come. And then I went back again. And then I went to the schools. And then I told them I was gonna have snacks for them. And I convinced, like, I don't know, 40 kids to come to this like basement of the bank and start talking about the community issues. And I said, I don't know what the community issues are. You gotta tell me. And it's funny because the community issues were really the social determinants of health that they came up with. And so they said things like racism, they said things like the environment, they said things like drugs and alcohol. And this was, I was 23 years old, and I just finished my degree, and my husband and I were there all by ourselves, our first like big, move. And these kids started working in these groups, and they formed this youth council, and they started doing these projects, and they designed them themselves. They designed students concerned about racism, any diversity, scared. And they did car washes and stuff, and they earned enough money, and they put up a big billboard in the middle of St. Paul and said, are you racist? And it was like crazy. People were talking about it, and it was just wonderful. And from that work as a community organizer, I started working at the city level. And I learned about things like AmeriCorps. I was like, oh, this is so interesting and great. And I went back to my hometown, which is Cleveland, and my husband and I moved home. I started working. I started doing work very similar here and kind of moving up the ranks. And then I found my way from that eventually over to Northeast Ohio Medical University, which is kind of funny because my degree was in urban studies. My PhD was in urban studies and housing and economics and neighborhood. So like, why at a medical school? Very important though, because the social determinants of health make up 60% of our health. And genetics make up 30, but 15% of that 30 is probably the social determinants of health, right? So 75% of you is dependent on that. And your care is very important. You need a physician, you need a good physician, you need physicians to make a difference. But you have to marry those two concepts, and you have to bring community into it. And so that's pretty much how I got started in it. And I started working at Neomed, and I started talking to kids and doing the same thing. I said, well, what kind of health concerns do you have? And we went through this whole process. And as I'm doing this, and I'm like in year 2 of this, I get this phone call, and I answer it. I'm like, hello? And it's one of my students. His name was Lewis. And the group that we did in St. Paul was called Teens Networking Together. And Lewis is on the other line, and he's like, Gina, is that you? I'm like, yes, who is this? He's like, it's Lewis. I'm like, Lewis? And he's like, we're bringing TNT back. And that was the name of the youth group that studied the social determinants of health. And it had fizzled because a couple of the people running it had done some shady things. And so they kind of left. And Lewis calls me, and he's got Wendy Casada. I went to her quinceañera, and it was like crazy. Like, these kids came back into my life. And I found out from them, I mean, this is really cool. When I talked to them, I said, so what do you remember? They're like, oh, we learned more in TNT than some of them actually went on to college, because none of them came from homes. Lewis didn't make it to college, but oh my goodness, he could have easily. circumstances, but Wendy did. She made it, and she said, I learned more in TNT. I learned about how to write grants. I learned how advocacy. I learned how to talk to people. I learned how to stand up. I learned how to be a community member, and I learned how to have my voice be a part of what was going on and include others. And that blew me away. And it was kind of the combination of those things that really pushed me to feel like, okay, we got to keep going with HPAC, and we got to figure out how to make this happen, because people don't always understand that the greatest assets sometimes come from the community, and those assets are in every community, and that the kids of those communities have great wisdom. And it's hidden, it's latent sometimes, but if you can find it, they can make a huge difference. So it's kind of how I got started in it.
And so, when you set out to really get started with the project, what did you hope to accomplish?
So, what I hoped to accomplish when I started it, I was actually at Cleveland State still. I was teaching there, and I was running the Graduate Grant Writing Center. And I had met a principal at John Hay, and I'd been working with somebody from the College of Teaching, who was teaching some kind of urban education course. And I set out to teach kids in this high school how to write grants on community issues. There's a program called Neighborhood Connections that comes out of Cleveland Foundation, and that's what I set out to do, was like have them learn how to write issues, much like TNT. And as I was doing this, I took a new job at Neomed, and we found out that they needed some more pipeline programs, and they were really interested in helping to affect the urban communities and the rural communities that were under-resourced. And so what I set out to do was to build this population to go to write grants and to learn about community and citizenship. And what I ended up, I kind of ended up doing that, but I ended up building with people in the community. I didn't do this on my own. There were tons of people who worked with me, and tons of organizations who designed this. They all had a piece, and they wrote it, and we just it was like a jigsaw puzzle. We just kind of put it together as we went along, and it wasn't, it was very, and this is a funny word, but it was very organic in nature. Like, it just kind of happened. And it was like, like a terrarium that was just the moisture, everything was just right. And it just grew and grew, and now we've kind of broken out of the terrarium. We're so big, but I don't know.
That's not a problem. What are you most proud of right now with where the program is?
I'm most proud of the students. And my staff, and the community that hears that, and the communities that are growing. I'm proud that we're talking about things like depression. My mom had schizophrenia. She was paranoid schizophrenic, and my life was really interesting growing up. And it taught me to be really resourceful. Like, we went through everything. We went through not having the heat on, and we would, do our homework by candlelight. And when she was healthy, and she could help us. And so I'm most proud of the fact that my mom, who was a teacher before she got really sick with her schizophrenia, taught me a lot of the basics and the building blocks. And so did my dad. He was very involved in the community. He used to take me to community meetings all the time. And the two of them together raised me to recognize there's tremendous assets in the community, and you just have to be resourceful. My mom, we would tape together her car, and we would say, oh, this is so artistic and lovely, while her bumper was falling off. But it was okay, because it was who we were, and we didn't judge ourselves based on that. And so I'm most proud when I see the kids who come from communities who struggle with some of those issues, and struggle with families that have challenges. And all families have challenges, but those that they figured out how to be resourceful and find a part of themselves where they could be proud. So that's cool.
What is the most interesting or unique project that you can remember?
Oh my gosh. There's so many cool projects. I'll tell you one of my favorite projects. I brought some medical students. So I teach a community experience class. I co-directed with Dr. Lee, who's one of my mentors. And I was teaching this class and I was bringing medical and pharmacy students in. I was trying to teach them, the students, how to hear what the community was saying and what the kids were saying. And so I had medical students with the high school students in different groupings. And what I saw from that process, a program grew out of it. And one of these programs that grew out of it was the kids were talking about, well, you know what? People die in our community earlier than in other communities, and race is an issue, and we really believe that. And they learned how to research that, and they studied it, and they said, oh my gosh, 5 miles down the road, they have a life expectancy of 10 years longer. And our medical students worked with our kids, and they decided on a project around education, and they did this ACT prep piece, but it wasn't about, because we're doing ACT prep and we have to do this, it was about, we've got to change the dynamics in our community. And that was most interesting and intriguing to me. And then they did like Instagram with like word of the day, you know, and they flooded the school. Like they would put little posters up with like SAT words or whatever. And they recognized that their schools didn't have all the opportunities that other schools had, and they recognized that their scores were lower and their persistence and completion. That wasn't something I taught them. It was something they discovered, and then they found a solution to make it. And those kids are in college still today. I just heard from one. I was so touched when I heard from him.
What's your vision for the future?
I don't know. I don't necessarily have a vision. I just have a hope. I have a lot of hopefulness. I have a hope that people will understand that it's okay to be them, and that they can make a difference, and that it's not about you. It's about you and your community. And that's a hard one, because I'm self-centered sometimes. Like I can't help myself. Like I don't want to be, but it happens to me. I think it happens to everybody. And so trying to figure out how to keep yourself, but also bring your community in and be respectful. Like I'll do little things, like bring the newspaper. My neighbor's gone for a week and I see a pile of newspapers. I'm like, oh, let me go bring it up and put it in their backyard or something like that. And so kind of teaching this, we have rights, but we have responsibilities to each other, and we have to do that. And so my vision is around citizenship health and getting kids to recognize the social determinants of health communities and to help each other in little ways. It doesn't have to be big, just little wins.
Could you see that applying community in the broadest sense of overall? One of the things I think about a lot is how everyone has, like you said, self-centered kind of bent, especially about modern society, pushes us in that direction a lot.
Yeah.
We've lost a lot of that sense of community, but also at a time when one of the national slogans, not to get political, but it is America First. And it's, where's that sense of global community?
Right. No, you're right.
What are your thoughts?
We have a responsibility. We have a responsibility as humans to help. What happens across the water is important to us. It impacts us. We impact each other. And as humans, we have to remember to be kind and do the right thing and help others and not put ourselves first, or we're not going to have food. We're not going to have clean water. We're not going to have all the things that we need. And so it's not America first. It's community first. It's how can I be helpful? How can I do my part? And by the way, you don't have to be perfect to do your part. Like, I'm dysfunctional. Everybody's dysfunctional, okay? Like, let's just say it. So it's okay. It's okay to be dysfunctional. But there's parts of you that are functional, and find that and give it and make it a part of it. And you don't have to be perfect, because there's always going to be a typo. You're always going to trip, or someone's going to spill something. It doesn't matter.